What is your confidence meter in the direction of this Titans franchise? I know a few weeks ago it was probably really low. I'm sure it has grown and risen a little bit over the last few games. We're going to dive into that from the standpoint of Brian Callahan, Will Levis, offensive line, Dennard Wilson, all of it. We're diving in today with a special guest, Easton Freeze. This is the Music City Audible. Let's get to it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Music City Audible podcast presented by Broadway Sports Media in partnership with 440 Sports. I'm Justin Graver. With me, as always, Justin Melo, and as I mentioned, Easton Freeze. Justin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Glad to have Easton on the show. We obviously go way back. Broadway Sports alumni himself, now thriving over there at A to Z. Couldn't be happier for him. I'm excited he's here today.
Yeah, Easton, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Fellas, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to talk to you guys. It feels like it's been too long. And yeah, look at us, just moving up in the world, doing big things. It's exciting.
Who'd have thought, right? Paul Rudd meme. Who'd have thought?
Exactly. Not me. Yeah.
All right, let's dive right into this thing. We're looking at our confidence in the direction of this Titans franchise, and we're going to start with the obvious. Will Levis, who has played better and better. It feels like I would say the last 3 games are his best 3-game stretch as a pro, bar none. He had flashes last year, but nothing that compares in terms of consistency from week to week that he's doing this year. Over the last 3 games, almost 68% completion percentage, 748 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, a 107.2 passer rating. But then there is the little tiny note, 20 sacks taken in the last 3 games.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it.
So let's start here,
Crop
Easton.
that part of the stats. Just leave that part out.
We only share the positive numbers. No, Easton, let's start here because you've been doing some quality film breakdown on Twitter. And if you guys are not following Easton on Twitter, you really should be. So shout out to what Easton's doing there. It's just his name, at Easton Freeze. But you've been breaking this stuff down. And when it comes to specifically, let's look at the negative first, the sacks. Where do you fall just last week alone? How much of that was on Levis? How much of that was on the offensive line? And how much of it might be on the season taking its toll on Levis to the point where when he does have the handful of clean pockets and the internal clock goes off and it's still a clean pocket, to him, he's like, well, now I need to make something happen because it's been too long. I'm not recognizing that I'm in a clean pocket, so I'm going to run straight forward into a sack. What's the balance here from your estimation?
Yeah, it's unfamiliar territory for him. I think you're all over it. It's a massive issue. And I put out a graphic visualizing how well he's looked the past 3 weeks as compared to his first 3 weeks. Because his season, you can kind of bifurcate into first 3, most recent 3. Because those middle 2 games, he's got 11 snaps in Miami, and then he's too hurt to play in the Colts game, and that's a disaster. And when you compare, yards, completion percentage, ADOT, touchdowns, big time throws, interceptions, all the way down, everything is dramatically better except for the sacks and the pressure to sack ratio. In his first 3 games, 15 sacks, 34th out of 35 quarterbacks, 31.9% pressure to sack ratio, 33rd out of 35 quarterbacks. The last 3 somehow worse than that, dead last in both categories, 20 sacks, 42.6% pressure to sack ratio. Almost half the time he's pressured, the guy's going down. He looks different back there. I think that's kind of what you were alluding to as he's come back from injury, and you've seen the superhero tendencies reign in, playing within himself, playing within the structure of the offense. It feels kind of like a natural consequence of that pendulum swing too far in the other direction, where he's a little bit afraid to create, move, boot out, like do put the cape on occasion, and not panic back there. And, you can also throw the ball away. I was talking to Paul Kaharski yesterday, like, when was the last time he just threw the ball 10 feet into the stands? Like, out the back of the end zone, we've seen once or twice, but I can't tell you the last time he just threw the ball away to live another down. It's diving directly into the pressure instead. And so that's kind of the next step for him, I think. And if you had to pick one or the other, the dumb, frenetic, unpredictable things, or just taking too many sacks, I guess you take the sacks. As to whose fault it is, it's largely his fault, and that's kind of been a big element of the discourse on Twitter this week. People talking about 8 sacks. So I think 2 were on Latham, 2 were on. It's hard. And talking to Brian Callahan and the coaching staff on Monday, they continue to point to the fact that sacks are an offensive problem, and that's like the most obfuscatory answer you can give as a coach. It sounds like you're just making excuses. But I think that the more you watch the actual tape, and you guys can attest to this, it's rarely ever just one person's fault.
Yeah.
It really is it's a collection of all of the moving pieces. And Will Levis has a lot of blame in most of them. It's not all his fault, but he's not doing, the best quarterbacks manage to turn pressures into at least minimizing the bleeding, if not turning them into positive plays. He's not really doing that at all. So I think that's the next step for him. And the way he's playing out, if you're doing a checklist of quarterbacking things that's 10 things long, he's doing 9 of them really well as compared to what we saw before. And that's awesome. He's just got that one really, really glaring issue that's keeping him from playing awesome football right now.
We're pretty close to being able to use the classic Brian Fantana meme with that pressure to sack rate, where 60% of the time he gets sacked every time.
That's right.
Getting pretty close to 60% up there.
Yeah.
We're less than 20% away.
We're on pace to get there by the end of the year. Just be patient.
Yeah, we might get there. Easton, as a follow-up question, you had put out a stat that really, really caught my attention on Sunday. I think it was from Next Gen Stats, right, where NFL Pro, where you had the time to throw stat for him. It was quite high, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, it was one of the fastest release times among all starting quarterbacks across Week 12. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The caveat to that is, for some reason, you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
NGS, they don't include sacks in that number. So it's like, it seems to be very good when he's getting rid of the ball. But if we factored in the sacks, I felt like he was holding the ball like 5 seconds on a lot of those sacks. I don't have the exact number. I think Pro Football
I have
Focus,
the exact number. Yeah.
Yeah, they do include sacks, right? And it was still, if I remember correctly, it was still a little quicker than I expected it to be. It felt like he was holding on to it an eternity when he got sacked.
Before you go, Justin, there's a difference between time to throw and time to sack. You cannot include sacks in time to throw because there's no time to X.
Yeah, we need an all-encompassing time to whistle statistic. That's what we need. Our buddy Zach Lyons pointed this out to me, and I actually didn't know that. It makes sense when you think about it, but I wasn't really thinking about that. You're right. When you look at the time to sack compared to the time to throw in that game alone, I think his time to throw was like in the 2.3s, and his time to sack was like 3.51, holding on to the ball for an eternity in the NFL. He is getting the ball out quickly. And another little statistical quirk that I wrote about at A to Z Sports last night, actually. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a graphic from the 33rd team drifting around on Twitter that had every quarterback's EPA per dropback metric. And they were attributing that statistic to the quarterbacks and not really to the offense, which is kind of misleading because it's more an offensive thing than it is a quarterback thing. But Will Levis was like 17th in the league on Sunday, below CJ Stroud, who he looked clearly better than, below Tommy DeVito, which we all saw what happened there. And a lot of fans were like, what is this stupid advanced bougie metric that clearly is not indicative of what actually happened? I started digging on it. Will Levis's performance on Sunday was the third time since the year 2000 that a quarterback has had a passer rating north of 120 and still a negative EPA per dropback, which is almost impossible to do. The only way to do it is to be super duper efficient when you do throw the ball, but also get sacked a zillion times. So much so that still dropping back is technically a net negative for your team. So yeah, man, it's weird. It does. I asked Brian Callahan about this at his press conference yesterday. I don't know about you guys. To me, it feels like when the first read or the first beat of the structure of the play is working and he's able to execute the process, it's really well done. It's really efficient. It's on time. It's on target. But whenever things break down and he has to get to read 2, read 3, get back to a read, he seems to panic a little bit. He holds onto the ball a little bit. And I think mentally that's where he comes off the rails, and you can kind of see it in the way that he plays.
Yeah, there was one play specifically, I remember last game, where he was looking at Calvin Ridley initially to his right, and Ridley was very well covered, and he hung out there to his right, hoping, well, maybe when he gets to his break, he'll create some separation. And finally, he didn't. He had to come back and swing it to the opposite side of the field to Tony Pollard, and it resulted in a 4-yard loss on the play. Whereas if he makes that decision a little quicker and gets it to Pollard a little quicker, that defender that comes up and tackles Pollard actually has a chance maybe to shake him and create something there. But because the processing is slow, it took time there. And just to emphasize this, the 33rd team also put out a stat on Sunday afternoon Will Levis has a passer rating of 109.3 since week 10. Levis has also been sacked 20 times in that same span. Levis became the first player since the merger to have a passer rating above 105 in a 3-game span when they were sacked 20 plus times.
That's just him paying homage to the Houston Oilers going into that game in Houston. Okay?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's
all
crazy,
that is.
man. But I do. I mean, we're talking about it in a negative light. I do think it's a step in the right direction for him because, for me at least, last season and coming into the year, two big knocks. One, I think his pocket management was and still largely is quite bad, and I'm not sure that's ever going to get better. We'll see. The other thing is, he seems to see the field well and understand the process of the plays, like just a half tick late consistently. Everything is just barely off time. And these past 3 games are the first time where I've seen him in my naked eye. It feels like he is actually doing things on time exactly. It's just the primary element of the plays. I think we're trending in the right direction in terms of him processing on time. And that's why you're seeing this massive divide between when he's able to process and do the initial thing versus having to do more things, is where you see him out of time consistently.
Where I'm at right now, and you guys might disagree, but it's like, I don't think his pocket presence is ever going to get significantly better, right? Like significantly better. But where I'm at that excites me is all of a sudden he's avoiding, for the most part, the dumb interceptions and turnovers. And yes, there was one against Houston there that wasn't great, but it wasn't quite as egregious as the one against the Bears or the fumble against the Jets where he lobs it backwards. But to me, it's that he's starting to create enough explosives where you can live with the sacks as long as you're limiting the turnovers, right? Like if he can continue, and I think this is the realistic hope where everyone has to be, if he can continue generating the explosives, maybe they get a right tackle worth a shit next year, so he's under pressure a little less.
That's a big ask for this franchise, Justin. Well, I wouldn't hang your hat on that.
So maybe you're not, if pocket presence improves a little, the O-line gets a little bit better, he's generating the explosives, all of a sudden 8 sacks is 5 sacks. It's 4 sacks. And you continue generating those explosives. That is an area you can realistically get to and you can live with. I saw a stat. I think it was the 33rd team as well. It feels like a shout out to them this show. But over the last, I think, 3 weeks, like there's only one quarterback within 100 yards of passing yards generated through explosive plays, and it's Russell Wilson. He's at like 297, I think 298 yards on passing yards generated specifically through explosives. So that he's starting to create those, and you could live with some of the others.
Well, and not all sacks are created equally, right? And that's something that Brian Callahan has reiterated a couple times. Taking sacks on 3rd and 10 where you're trying to either take the sack or get the first down, not the end of the world. It's the sacks on 1st and 2nd down to get you behind the sticks. And it's also, are we taking the dumb young quarterback, run around? No, you lost 13 yards back there sack. Or are you taking the kind of goofy looking, but ultimately not all that penal sacks that we saw in Houston, where you're diving directly into the pressure towards the line of scrimmage like it's the first down marker, and you lose 2 yards.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the thing, I think, as we spin this positive, because I said we would start negative and then we just continued mostly negative. All of this to say, this is the best he's played in his career, this 3-game stretch. And what we're doing with this emphasis on the negative is talking about the one area I think that is left to improve upon, because he has taken much better care of the ball. He's hitting explosive plays. He's playing in with the rhythm and the timing of the offense. And I think, Easton, you're right a little bit there in that something we don't see him do very often, and maybe have never seen him do, at least at a high level, is extend plays that break down. Like I can think of a handful off the top of my head where he gets out of the pocket and thinks he's going to run, and then maybe he sees Josh Wiley 5 yards down the field and hits him. But as far as the Mahomes type of deal, or Josh Allen, or some college quarterbacks right now that are just who will run around in the backfield for 10 seconds, buying time, keeping their eyes downfield and hitting a 50-yard explosive, whatever. We basically have never seen Will Levis do that. But I think, to your earlier point, because when he got off script and tried to make things happen early in the year and it went as bad and as wrongly as it possibly could have, that he maybe has been a little neutered in terms of like, if it's not there, take the sack. Don't turn it over. And that's been drilled in his head so much. And he's doing that now, which I think we can see as a positive because it's a step. Like, he's not going to become an incredible quarterback in every facet of the game over, the course of a month or the course of the time he sat watching Mason Rudolph when he was recovering from his shoulder injury. So seeing this be as a step, I think is a good place to be. And now let's see, over the last, however many games this season, 6, 7, whatever it is, games left this season, can he make further steps? Can he start to throw the ball away? Can he start to have a chance to make decisions out of structure and make good decisions? And let's just see where he is, around week 16, 17, 18, and we'll assess our final, I guess, judgment heading into next year. But as of right now, let's put a cap on this conversation. Confidence rating in Will Levis to be the starter in 2025 right now, November 26th. Easton, what's your number 1 to 10?
Oh, man. Right now, I would say like an 8.
Yeah.
I think because there's 2 different reasons why he would be the starter next year, and they are both harmed or hurt in tandem, right? Because there's the element of are you actually intrigued enough with him as a prospect to want to play him? That goes hand in hand with what's the opportunity cost? What are your options? And with every good game he plays, those tend to correlate with wins. Those wins further distance you from draft options. They limit your offseason war chest in terms of your options, whether it's drafting or in free agency. And so I look at the schedule the rest of the way. The thing about this team is I think there's a decent chance they maybe offensively explode a little bit here down the stretch. Not to pump too much sunshine, but they just came off of a hellish stretch post-bye where they played 6 of the 7 top passing defenses by DVOA and by EPA. They just finished 3 games against top 6 defenses, 2 of them on the road, one of which was a big upset win. They still have 2 games against the Jaguars and the Colts and the Bengals, who are a really good offense but a quite bad defense, and the Texans again this time at home. It could look really awesome for them down the stretch, and that it'll be against much worse opponents, so that some folks may be like, well, how much, you take it with a grain of salt, which is fair. But I don't see Will Levis looking dramatically worse against the opponents ahead of them. I think there's a decent chance they win a handful more games. They're picking at 13 in the draft. Some people's draft dreams are crushed. But this team is ultimately better for it in the long run. I don't know. But in terms of him starting next year, I'm 1 or 2 wins away from being certain he will be the starter in 2025.
And if you look at just the week 15, 16, 17 schedule, the Titans face the number 1 easiest schedule of pass defenses for a quarterback. Now, caveat, this is a fantasy football stat. This is not like an NFL analysis stat. This is which teams have the easiest fantasy playoff schedule. That's
fantasy and bio.
That's why it's specifically weeks 15, 16, 17. Is that what I said? Yeah, 15, 16, 17. But still, that 3-week stretch, Will Levis will have the expectation to put up yards and throw some touchdowns because the defenses he's playing in that stretch have been terrible against quarterback production this year, whether you look at it from a fantasy angle or not. Justin, your confidence number.
Yeah, I'm a little lower, I think, but I'm at a 6.5 if I can use a half. And I get why Easton's an 8, because when I think about it, it's you can break this down really simple and say Justin Fields, Sam Darnold, Aaron Rodgers, not a good free agent class. I absolutely hate this draft class of quarterbacks. I think I'd be sick to my stomach if they dumped Will Levis and went for a Cam Ward, to be honest with you, right? I just don't see that at all. So I should probably be higher than a 6.5 based on that alone. I just think he's got to continue showing something. And I think he will for all the reasons you just stated. I don't need fancy stats to tell me the Bengals can't stop the pass for shit, right? You just watch them on Sunday. It is pathetic. Jacksonville's a goddamn nightmare at stopping the pass. They can't do it. They can't do a damn thing to stop the pass. Colts aren't very good either. I don't think the Commanders are very good. I don't think the Commanders are as good as their numbers indicate, right? Like, that's why they traded for Marshawn Lattimore at the deadline, and he hasn't even made his debut yet, right? Because of an ongoing injury. And I don't really like I like the nickel rookie corner they got, but the other spot's a bit of a mess on the boundary. And who knows what Lattimore looks like, even if he gets back this Sunday. So, yeah, I think I get with Easton. Like, I think they got a chance to have some really good offensive showings here down the stretch. And again, what they just came off of, I don't need fancy stats to tell me Brian Flores coached defense, Jim Harbaugh coached defense, D'Amico Ryans coached defense, right? And he played pretty damn good in those 3 games. So I'm at a 6.5, but looking at what the options are probably going to be, I should probably be higher than that.
Yeah, I am higher. I think I'm in that range that you're in, Easton, if not even higher than that. Like, I'd say I'm somewhere between an 8 and a 9, and it definitely has to do with the available options, but also the expectation I have that he's going to carry this 3-game stretch down the rest of the season and see, like, let's see it first before we fully assess it. But that's what I'm expecting at this point. That's the standard he's now set over these last 3 games, and we're going to hold him to that standard for the rest of the season. All right, let's move on a little bit here and talk about more confidence in the direction of this franchise as a whole in terms of the leadership of Brian Callahan and to an extent Ran Carthon, but I think we have confidence in Ran Carthon. Great draft class coming in this year, Jaquan Jackson notwithstanding. Other than that pick, I think pretty great draft class. Where are we at? Wait, should we do a quick
6th rounder?
Okay.
6th rounder.
Malik Washington was on the board.
Yeah, he's just annoying, though.
He is annoying. And they don't have anyone else because they put all their eggs in him as the punt returner. And he's been a mistake-prone punt returner. The special teams unit as a whole has been extremely mistake-prone. So you sometimes wonder if he's like being coached poorly from his special teams coordinator, or is he just like have terrible instincts when it comes to when he should field a punt and when he should return it and how securely he should hold the ball while he's returning it. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. I want to talk about Brian Callahan leading this franchise because first half of the season, we were questioning ourselves and, everything we thought about Brian Callahan in March, we were questioning from the first half of this year. Like, yeah, the scheme looks good. The play calling looks good, but can this guy be a head coach? It's not just being an offensive coordinator. It's like leading the whole franchise. And I think over the last 3 weeks, we have seen that even though they've only won one of these 3 games, we know the injuries on defense and where they're at as a team. Like, they're at a talent disparity when they're up against the Texans and the Chargers and the Vikings. But they played well in those games. They were competitive in all the games and they beat the Texans. So where are we at now? And this one isn't like a confidence in something happening. It's just like, what's your confidence level in Brian Callahan to be a head coach here for 5-10 years, bring winning seasons, playoff appearances, maybe, even more success than that? Where are you at on that scale right now, Easton?
I don't bring this up to be insufferable media victory lapper guy because nobody likes that guy, but I do think it's worth emphasizing. The reason why I got a lot of heat for this over on the A to Z side of things from a lot of people that didn't quite see it at the time, but I think in hindsight, it makes a lot more sense. The portion of this season where I became pretty certain this guy had what it takes wasn't the last 3 games. It was the 3 or 4 games before that. It was the stretch post by weeks 6, 7, 8, where you've got a messy divisional loss to the Colts with the whole Will Levis management thing, and then you get throttled by the Bills, and then you get double throttled by the Lions, and it's kind of a nightmare situation. And that's the reason why I at the time was like, guys, I think it's going to be okay, is because that's the portion of every bad team season where you're at risk of things really getting messy and coming off the rails. And for a coach, especially a new coach who's not proven, that's because now for a team that's 2-8 or whatever you are, the players in the locker room, like, that's kind of sunk in what the season is. The hope, you're no longer clinging to big hopes. In that week 6, 7, 8 range, like, you're still alive and you're working your ass off to turn the season around. And those specific games where things were really ugly on the field, the result, the product, it was bad. Those players and that coaching staff kind of had every reason in the world for messiness, for drama, for finger pointing and awkward sound bites from the locker room and obvious player effort issues in the field of play, the things you see from teams that start to fall apart, right? Like think about the Saints. Think about what the Giants are going through right now. Think about what the Bears offense looked like before they fired their OC. Think about what the Raiders offense looked like before they fired their OC. Like these typical symptoms of dysfunction, not just bad team on the field, but bad team in general, dysfunctional team.
It's ass.
You didn't see any of that.
That was Brian Burns from the Giants locker room on Sunday.
It's ass.
It's ass.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing you look for me at least, when I'm trying to figure out whether or not a coaching staff has a control of their team. You didn't see any of those symptoms from this team. They stuck together. The players, for all of their failings, were trying their hardest out there. The messaging in the locker room stayed consistent. The emotional highs and lows when we talked to Brian Callahan and his coordinators and the position coaches, there was no finger pointing. They were very much trust the process. Like, I didn't get any indications through that stretch of the season that things were starting to come apart. And that's when I would expect them to. And so that's why I think that my confidence is high. You know, if I'm putting a number on it, like also an 8 or a 9, I think that Brian Callahan has the goods. We've seen clearly his offense works. He knows what he's doing from a schematic standpoint. And I think he has the head coaching intangible traits you need to be able to control a team and control a locker room.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that I've seen that's a really good point. First of all, that the fact that this team didn't quit on him, he never lost the locker room, gives you confidence. And also the fact that
actually he lost one guy. Jamal Adams quit on this team. Everybody else did not quit on this team. That guy wanted out. So he lost one guy. There's a red mark on him.
Yeah, who knows what happened there. And they traded Ernest Jones. Who knows what was going on there either. I mean, they netted good value out of that whole spiel. True. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm probably not quite as high. I think I'm at like a 7 right now because there are a few areas that he's got to prove this. He can't do anything until this offseason to raise this number for me. He's got to prove that he understands the importance of special teams and those like hidden yards that Mike Vrabel always used to talk. Like if there's all Mike Vrabel's faults and whatever and annoyance and gruffness with the media, the guy understood situational football better than anybody, and he understood the margins and the game of inches and the hidden yards aspect, and his special teams units were not always great, but at least he had the logic. Like he understood that they were an important part of the game, and it feels like the Titans made roster decisions in August that are still haunting them right now by cutting players who were better on special teams to keep 5 tight ends, whatever. Colt Anderson, not a capable coordinator to be in the position he's in. So that's my one hang up right now with Callahan. He's got to prove that he can fix that part of the team. But other than that, I think I'm at like a 7. Justin?
Is step 1 on that front fire Colt Anderson as soon as the season's over? Okay.
Absolutely. It doesn't do any good to do it right now, but it's like Black Monday, he's out the door.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to get rid of the guy. Like, I don't know how you sell this fan base, sell the locker room, sell those players on, like, it always amazes me how it's never his fault, right? They're just the unluckiest special teams unit of all time, and they can't tackle and they can't cover, and it's mind blowing that the guy is issue free, if you will. But yeah, I'm with you, Graver. I think I've got to see more. I still kind of feel like this is a team that's being coached by a coordinator. I think we said that a couple weeks ago. Like all the situational football, just the hidden stuff and special teams, of course. Like I went and looked it up earlier. Hassan Haskins has got the 3rd most special team snaps on the Chargers. I don't think that's a coincidence. That's a great head coach there in Harbaugh, and that team is tough on defense. They're tough on special teams. They're exceeding expectations. Like it's those little things that I think there's still growth opportunities, if you will. But I'm encouraged. By no means am I calling for the guy's head. I don't think he should be one and done or anything, crazy like that. But I'm more of a, journey kind of remains out for me.
Yeah. All right. Last one here. We're going to do this quicker because I think we're going to be in agreement. Confidence level in Dennard Wilson leading the defense. I'll start on this one. 10 out of 10. This guy's a stud. He gets defensive backs you pick up off the street in August playing excellent. He's got rookie Jarvis Brownlee.
They picked up Daryl Worley in November. We're still in November.
And safeties playing excellent that you just had to go grab. I was talking about Baker, but yeah, I mean, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., 5th round rookie, playing outstanding. You haven't seen hardly any of L'Jarius Sneed since the team realized that football season had started. He's been out since that point. And the defense has played very well. They had a string of maybe some easy matchups to start the year, but I think all that did was give them confidence. Last week was one of their better performances with the 2 forced turnovers, the sacks that basically ended the game there with Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry. So anyway, to keep it short, 10 out of 10 for me on Dennard Wilson. Justin, I'll go to you next, and we'll close it with Easton.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. I mean, there's no doubt. It's funny how aware these players are nowadays, right? Like, I interviewed Cheeto the other day, and I asked him about Dennard Wilson, and he said he brought up that stat that was going around Twitter. I'm like, you saw that on Twitter. You must have. Don't tell me you didn't. How he's like, every team he's been at was like number 1, 2, or 3 in passing defense one year, and the following year they were like 28, 29, 30 when he left. I'm like, Cheeto saw that on Twitter 100%. But it's true. The Titans are still number 1 right now in passing yards allowed per game. Like, you hold CJ Stroud to, I think, like 240 net yards, 2 picks. Yeah, without Snead, Awuzie, Diggs, and Hooker, like 4 out of your 5, what we thought were going to be your every down DBs. And I say 5 because, nickel defense. McCreary is the only one out there that we thought would be out there every single snap. And you're doing it with Brownlee and Baker. And as I said, the safety, the unstoppable safety tandem of Mike Brown and Darryl Worley, like, it's unbelievable. And not, and the pass rush was all right on Sunday, but it's not like they've been getting a ton of help from the pass rush all year long, right? The secondary, these guys are covering, and they are covering well. So yeah, 10 out of 10 on Dennard Wilson, no brainer.
Easton, close it out.
Yeah, I've been sitting here trying to think of a reason to say 9 out of 10. I need to see him have better players and do less with them to be able to say that. Like, the defense has not necessarily trended in the right direction as the season's gone on, but there are some obvious deficiencies he's having to work around. This front is not very versatile and very thin, and they can't rush the passer for much of the games. But he's making the most of it. And he has, the back end, like you said, that nickel defense having one starter level guy back there. Although I think we're reaching a point where you can start to wonder if Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is just an NFL starter at this point.
Oh, 100%.
I would
100%. But it wasn't the plan going in, right?
Right. Exactly. So, but he's making do, man. And when I look at the triage this unit's gone through, the personnel deficiencies he started with in the first place, I see like 7 or 8 different pretty reasonable excuses you could use for any other defensive coordinator if things weren't going nearly as well as they are. And they are going fine. And how many games this year can we point to and say, well, the defense lost this one? Like maybe one of those games, right? So I think that he's awesome. I hope that people don't realize it and he stays around forever, because he is somebody that I wouldn't mind giving some head coaching interviews to, and I wouldn't be shocked if he gets some. And for Brian Callahan's sake, I really hope that people think that he stinks.
I agree. All right, we got one last thing to do. Sponsor obligation called I'll Drink to That, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. And today we're drinking to our predictions, Justin. Take that. You didn't see that one coming, did you? Guess what, Melo? You got a win last week. You finally did it. And this is the hardest one I've had to score yet, because you had Texans 28, Titans 18. I had Texans 27, Titans 17. We both had a Titans 10-point loss. But you were closer to the final score. Even though I actually nailed the Texans' final score with 27, you had it with the Titans scoring 1 more point. So I gave you the win, even though I could have taken this one for myself, which puts you back in front by 1 game. This week, I am going to predict a Titans win. The Commanders have lost 4 games in a row. Cliff Kingsbury is doing the thing he does where his team hits November and the offense falls off a cliff. The cliff. Jaden Daniels might lose the Rookie of the Year to Bo Nix. He's first half Rookie of the Year, but he's not. He might. I mean, we'll see what happens the rest of the season. But right now, I think it's probably Bo Nix or someone else, Brock Bowers. And I'm going to predict the Titans.
Brock,
right?
No one's watching him. He's so good.
I know.
No one's watching him, but it's awesome.
I'm going to go Titans 27, Commanders 21. Justin, hit me.
I got a hard time. I want to so bad, and I'll say this. If the Titans win this game, I'm going to start believing like an idiot that it's possible, because I think of the 2 games against Jacksonville. I don't think the Texans are very good. I think they're going to win the Colts game. They could win the Bengals game. I'm going to start believing something's possible, but I don't think I could bring it in me to do it. I think after Washington loses to Dallas, they're not head coached by Cliff Kingsbury. I think Dan Quinn's a good head coach. I think he gets them back on track. But I think Titans have another good offensive showing. I'm going to go Commanders 30, Titans 27.
Nice. Easton, you want to give us one for fun?
Sure, just for fun. And if I nail it exactly, then I think I win the season on one go.
I agree. You'll have a 100%.
So right, I'll say Titans win, and we have to watch Melo start to lose his mind and start to believe.
We're gonna do it.
I'll say Titans 28-25.
Nice. I love weird numbers like 25. I'll drink to that. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, the premier wine, spirits, and beer store in East Nashville, serving the community since 1985. Their knowledgeable staff is proud to help you with large parties, themed events, or finding something unique for a special occasion. From birthday parties to milestone celebrations to everyday moments, Sinkers can help with the right drink for every occasion. If you head to the sinkersbeverages.com website or check the link in this podcast description, you can join the In-Crowd. In-Crowd members get access to allocated wines and spirits, exclusive events, early access to barrel releases, and more. All right, that'll do it for this one. Thank you, Easton, for joining us. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below. Anything you want, comment below. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages. We'll be back on Sunday to recap this game. Until then, y'all stay safe out there and tighten up.
A Broadway sports media production.